Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to our 60-second Spotlight programme. The reason it's called 60-second Spotlight is because each guest has only 60 seconds in which to answer the questions given by the audience. Once again, we'll be talking about issues that affect students at present. Firstly, I'd like to welcome our politicians from the North Down area. Stephen Agnew of the Green Party.
Hello.
Peter Weir of the DUP.
Hello.
Michael Boyard of the Alliance Party.
Good afternoon.
And Leslie Craig of UUP. So without further ado, let's have our first question from Rory MacDonald Watson.
Does the panel believe that same-sex couples should be given the same right to marriage as the rest of the population?
Stephen Agnew.
I absolutely do. I think it's a question of equality. It's a question of bringing an end to discrimination, and it's actually, I think, something that would improve our society. I think that if you believe in the institution of marriage, giving that commitment and that certainty to couples, and to ending the discrepancy in the law between civil partnerships and marriage in Northern Ireland can only be a good thing.
Well, I'm a big fan of marriage. I got married at the grand old age of 22, and because I feel passionately about why marriage is important for society, I don't understand why anybody should be excluded from marriage. Like Stephen says, for me it's a matter of equality. If there's nothing wrong with, if we as a society don't believe there's anything wrong with being gay, then why should we exclude same-sex couples from the same rights that differing sex couples should be entitled to? So myself and actually the Green Party brought a motion to North Down Borough Council in favour of this, and I know Stephen brought a motion to the Assembly, and I think that's a good thing. It's important we have a debate about it, but I don't see any reason why same-sex couples should be excluded from marriage.
Peter Weir.
Well, I would take a different view. Both myself and my party would take a view that we believe that the definition of marriage, that the traditional Christian definition of one man and one woman, which is what prevails, I suppose, in many places, is the correct definition. Marriage by itself is actually something which is restricted. It's restricted on a number of grounds. It's restricted on age. It's restricted on the linkages between people. It's restricted in terms of the numbers. I mean, we believe in terms of legal position, it's monogamy rather than polygamy, for instance, in this society. And we also believe that some of the arguments that have been used in terms of equality are spurious. In terms of the main rights that are there from a marriage are available through a civil partnership. We believe this is unnecessary and may well be in many ways being pushed, I think, particularly by Agenda Across the Water, by the Prime Minister to create a particular message.
Leslie Craig.
Again, the partnership, equal partnership, really was designed to cover that situation. Again, having a Christian background, I trace marriage back to the scriptures, and there it's quite clear that it is a union between a man and a woman, and therefore I would be opposed to that. I don't have any negative view on gay or other couples. That's a matter for themselves. Again, it is referred to in the scriptures, but the partnership actually covers that, and I think marriage is a step too far, so I would not be supportive of that.
Thank you. So let's have our second question from Zara Lucas.
Does the panel believe that reducing the voting age to 16 would increase young people's interest in politics?
Like a word.
I think potentially yes, but I don't think that's the main reason why we should reduce the voting age to 16. I think that if you're paying taxes at 16, I think if you can join the army at 16 and fight in Iraq, that you should have the right to choose who governs over you in that situation. So yes, I absolutely agree in lowering the voting age. I think it would certainly help in terms of engaging people with what the issues and engaging people at a younger age, trying to communicate why who you elect matters to your daily lives, how it contributes to your education, whether your ability to get a job or not. All these things matter just as much at 16 as they do someone that's 18 or 19. So I totally agree that voting age should be reduced to 16.
Peter Weir?
Well, no, as a party, well, first of all, we think, yes, I agree, it would create some level of greater interest, but as a party, we believe that 18 is the right level as the changeover. That's for a number of reasons. Michael mentioned, for instance, some of the rights that are there at 16. Most rights occur at, or the changeover point is 18. Even he mentioned in terms of where he's erroneous on one point, that yes, you can join the army at 16, but you're actually prevented from frontline service until you're 18, and you can only join the army with parental consent. So it's actually an issue that's, from a changeover point of view, a lot of rights, even where there are some rights at 16, is quite restricted at that point. We're also in a situation where this is the general position that in all but one of European countries, the voting age is at 18, and indeed on, I think it's around about 90% of the world, the voting age is at 18. So, you know, there's always going to be an arbitrary judgment on what the dividing line is, but we believe that 18 is probably the right sort of defining point in terms of voting age.
Does he agree?
Well, I don't agree with Peter in this one. I don't see why young people, particularly nowadays when they're so effective in politics classes and all the rest of it, you're studying it at school, you're very much aware of all that involves, you take an interest in civic affairs. Civics used to be taught in schools, no longer is, and I have no difficulty with it. I'm glad Peter pointed out the error, though,
I
because
apologise.
it's all right,
That's
it's all
the
right,
case.
because you can certainly join the army at 16 or the services, but you would not actually be in frontline service until after that. And I think there's also a question of parental sort of support for that. But I don't have any difficulty with that. Yeah, vote it on.
Steve Agnew?
Absolutely. In fact, this is another issue that I brought to the Assembly and put forward in a vote, and indeed it was a motion that was passed. I very much believe we should reduce the voting age to 16. I take issue with Peter's point about the different rights we achieve at age 18. A lot of those are around, for example, alcohol consumption, smoking, are around protecting the young person. Whereas I think voting rights isn't an issue of protection, and I think there is an issue of capacity, but there's also the issue of what is the right time. So I think the question was whether or not it'll engage young people younger. I think it'll certainly do that, but it'll also tie in better with the curriculum, the teaching of citizenship. So you're learning about access to democracy and participating in democracy, and then doing it. And I think one final point on it is 18 is a very transient age for young people. A lot of young people will move to university, they'll be registered to vote in their home, and then move and not be registered. So I think 16 is a settled age. You get in the habit of voting, and you'll hopefully continue it going forward.
Thank you. Let's have our third question from Michael Jordan.
What do the panel think about the proposed changes to young learner drivers?
Peter Weir?
Well, I think it's part of graduate driving licence. There's a cocktail of measures, and we're not quite sure what will eventually emerge out of that. And some of those things I think are good in terms of issues around a certain period of time where people have to, before they can take their test. I think we're also get it wrong in this country, before you can actually, before you get your test, you're restricted, for example, that you couldn't use any motorway skills, and I think there's a range of those things. It's about trying to drive up safety while also protecting individuals' rights on that basis. But also, if we can actually improve the situation in terms of fatalities, it's also something which hopefully will drive down the exorbitant rate of car insurance, particularly for drivers. I think it needs to be targeted where measures you have, not so much at young drivers, but actually learner drivers and inexperienced drivers, because one of the big things of no matter what age, whenever somebody learns to drive, is actually the inexperience. And while most people will learn whenever they're quite young, that can also actually hit people at later stages. So I think whatever restrictions are there, it's got to be across the board on that regard. And it's striking that balance, because again, while the figures have come down massively over the last number of years in terms of fatalities and road injuries, it's still too many. And anything we can do to reduce that further, I think, is something that we need to examine.
Is he Craig?
Yes, if you look at statistics, you'll find that most of the accidents occur in that younger age group. But there are reasons for that. In America, for example, you can drive much earlier. I think it could be reduced, but it would have to change the whole attitude towards driving. For example, there's been some discussion recently, the big risk is you do not have the experience. I think you can drive, and there are good, careful drivers who could be driving at that much younger age, and I would support that. But when you're driving, once you pass your test, and you could do that within 3 months, say, you really do lack experience. You've got to be very careful about that, particularly if you have young people in the car with you, your own mates, and that applies to girls and boys. you can be a little bit perhaps careless, so you've got to be very careful about that. But I certainly would support it coming down, but there'd have to be new restrictions. For example, maybe only family members could accompany you, during your restricted period. How are we doing on time there?
Steve Nagley.
I think it is a question of experience, and I didn't learn to drive until I was 29. As an inexperienced driver, I was probably more dangerous than a younger but more experienced driver. So I think it's a question of experience. It's a question of experience rather than age. I think we do need to address the fact that you can't drive on motorways during driving lessons, etc. I think you need to be exposed to that and get experience of that while you're learning. And I think we do need to improve the driving test, and perhaps even introduce a certain review as well, because we all develop bad habits, and there are ways there maybe we need to keep that in balance, so that we need to make sure it's not just a money raising exercise if we do go down that road. It's genuinely about road safety. But I think the key is actually getting the driving test right, and driving lessons, and indeed the quality of driving lessons is given, because I experienced vast differences in quality there as well.
Well, like Stephen, I was a bit of a late learner. Not quite as late as him though, but I've only been driving for about 2 years. If anybody's only trying to reverse in the car parking space out there, they'll see that. I'm relatively skeptical about the new changes. My personal preference is that learning to drive becomes less about passing a test than it is about learning the skills which actually enable you to drive. I think a better way, and I know some other countries do it it takes about a year, but you have to experience all sorts of driving conditions, including motorway, different types of weather, so it becomes a longer term process rather than just cramming in how you do your manoeuvres and passing within a matter of weeks. So I would be much more in favour to be about actually learning how to drive rather than learning to pass a test. I think that's the key thing, more than anything else.
Thank you. So let's have our last question from Harry Stinson.
What policies might the panel devise to help the redevelopment of Bangor Town Centre in the current economic downturn?
That's you, Craig.
Betty, I started with me there. It's about 10 years ago whenever the council decided to really kick-start the regeneration of Bangor Town Centre by negotiating properties and preparing a development brief. And you guys probably won't know, but we ended up with a very limited choice at the end of the day. Some of us were very keen that would go back on the market, that we'd go for a new development brief and take new bids. The bidding, though, at that time was not across the board in the council, and they voted by 13 to 12 to give it to that developer. Those of us who were in the 12 minority obviously were proved to be correct, because 10 years down the road we're virtually in the same situation where the Department of Social Development now owns the site, and they're going to prepare a development brief and put it out again. That was meant to be the main sort of start to regenerating that whole area, increasing the footfall. We've had a legacy of poor shopping, poor planning over the years from the 70s, and we don't have anywhere near the right mix of shops down there. We need to have people living downtown again, and that's going to be addressed. So, poor start, can do better.
Steve Nagley.
Briefly, I would say that there's been mistakes made in the past, and I think the failure by previous Department of Environment ministers to regulate and protect town centres is one of those. The other one being concreting over the beach at Bangor, which I know annoys a lot of people. But we have to look going forward, what's the best thing to do now? And I think to some extent we have to accept what has happened. Out of town retail is very popular in Bangor, and we have to look at ways of making Bangor a town centre that's attractive for different reasons, not offering kind of niche products, sort of delis that the art pods actually that are being proposed, I think could be a positive step, getting a more kind of cultural quarter in Bangor. I think we need to offer something different other than just shopping. Of course we need retail, but it needs to be kind of unique, independent retail, but I think we need to go beyond retail as well, because as I say, we've got a very strong out of town retail product, so we need to develop something different, give people a reason to come into Bangor.
Yes, well, I think the key is actually to develop something unique about the town centre. The town centre should be the heartbeat of the town, it should be the centre of vibrancy, community and culture. And I think that's where we need to be looking towards. We're not going to, the town centre will not compete with the likes of Bloomfield and Spring Hill for the big retail. I think those days are gone. But it's about finding a unique selling point for the town centre, about making sure that there's something for everyone there, as I say, combining it with leisure, events, and it needs to be a place where people go for an experience rather than to just do their shopping. There'll still be shopping as part of that, but it's more about the experience. Whenever I go, if I'm going to do half an hour shopping, I'll go to Bloomfield. If I'm going to go to the town centre, it'll be for a few hours going in and out of shops, going for a coffee, and enjoying the atmosphere and the likes of Picky. So that's where we need to look for and to have something for people of all ages. That
As kids enjoy
feel
Picky
comfortable
too,
in.
it has to be said.
Peter Weir?
Yeah, it's, I suppose I know some of the things have been said already, but the long run, a lot of it's to do with redevelopment of Queen's Parade, and we're seeing, well, things have been slow, we are seeing movement on that. DSD has stepped in to vest large amount of land and given a considerable amount of contribution to that. But also, as I think has been mentioned, well, that's going to take some degree of time. There's short-term measures that can be taken. The art pods and trying to create a unique environment is action in the short term. There's also actually the fact that it is about unique selling point. And so, for example, the fact that we've got backing with the first, I think we're the first town centre in Northern Ireland to have free Wi-Fi in our town centre that is being provided by way of a scheme. That's something which can provide a wee bit of additional boost in terms of it. But also, actually, it mentioned made a Picky. It's also actually about providing facilities within the town which can actually attract in visitors from outside. So the redevelopment of Picky, and also I'm something which we're all, I think, very excited about, although it's not directly in the town centre but will attract people into Bangor, is the multi-million-pound new sports centre, which is due to be opened on Saturday week. It'll be open to the public. You know, more things that can actually attract in people into Bangor itself. You can then, on the back of that, actually help sort of from a commercial point of view. But it's also as well working with partnerships to provide.
I'm going to have to stop you there.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So that concludes this year's Spotlight. I'd like to thank you for all your cooperation, and I would like to thank our guests for being part of the reduction.